Welcome to the Business Leaders Legacy Podcast, the show where we go behind the scenes of business leaders to uncover their vision, strategies, and challenges they faced along the way. My name is Chris Bruner. I'm the CEO of Simple AI Solutions and the host of today's podcast. I'm excited to have Teddy Savage, the founder of the Cultivation Effect. Teddy is a leadership and culture strategist who has developed a holistic framework to help organizations cultivate high performing, resilient teams through leadership development, culture architecture, and organizational alignment. Teddy, thank you for being here. I appreciate your time. Can you please start off telling us a little bit about yourself, share about your journey, your business, and some of the clients you work with?
Yeah, for sure. First and foremost, Chris, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be a part of the Leadership Podcast. And first and foremost, a little bit about myself. I'm originally from Baltimore, Maryland. So I'm a city boy at heart, the youngest of three and the only boy, which gives me a lot of perspective on resilience, first and foremost. Let me tell you that much.
That's right.
But from a very young age, I was able to kind of understand some of what makes success a byproduct of hard work and sacrifice, right? I played sports all my life and always, aim to do things at a high level. And as I went forward from athletics to professional development, I started to see the translation between the laps that you run, the conditioning that you hate, the tackles that you make that don't feel comfortable, but how that kind of stuff yields the celebratory moments on game day. And so when I was getting into the corporate realm, right, I started to see those long nights, those sacrificing of some things that you would like to see were prerequisites to success. And so I carried that into, I would say, beyond, those first jobs, the McDonald's and Cinnabons of the world, but into being a investment consultant at T. Rowe Price. From there, becoming my own, owner of a speed and agility camp out in Houston, Texas, into Planet Fitness, where I became a national lead trainer to oversee all 2,400 locations nationally and internationally. Then the senior director of fitness product at Vasa, and now the founder of the Cultivation Effect. So it's been quite the journey, not linear at all, right? As no journey really is. But the types of clients that I work with today range from founders to C-level to L&D, H&R, entrepreneurs, or even just people that's seeking to have more impact in their own internal ecosystem. So that's pretty much who I work with today, and anybody that's really focused on development and growth.
Yeah, no, that is really cool. It's really cool to hear your journey, where you've been and where you're going and just the impact that you've had and the impact you have on individuals as you coach them and help them through and yeah, super cool.
Yeah.
Super cool. I want to know, what do you enjoy most about leading the cultivation effect and working with these organizations and leadership? What do you enjoy most?
Yeah, great question. First and foremost, I'm super passionate about development and organizational structures, right? Architecture is one of the most operative words in what you read about my bio. And I feel strongly that when we look at success, we should never be surprised by success or failure. It should always be a byproduct of the work that we do. And over my experiences over 2 decades of working in different sectors and industries, I've found that success sometimes is being ran into haphazardly. And on the converse side, when failure does present itself, organizations sometimes are in misalignment when they diagnose where the cause is, what the root cause was behind it. And so, you can really distill it down to people, process, and product. But oftentimes, organizations would misdiagnose and say it's a people problem. So really good people like myself or yourself or anyone else may have unnecessarily kind of been cut off from the organization. What brings me the most passion about the cultivation effect is I get to bring these organizations clarity so that they don't lose good people, so that they can be able to say with confidence, here's our problem, here's what we need to do, and the people are at the epicenter instead of the opposite way around.
Yeah, no, and that totally makes sense. Like having a good team of people working together makes such an
Mm,
important part of like organizational flow and making it as efficient as possible, right? I feel like it's so easy for organizations just to be like, let's throw money at it, let's do this, that, and it's that's often that, yeah, like you hit it on the head. That's often not the problem, right? Often bringing that clarity it is huge, and so that's really cool.
yeah.
I wanted to know, this may tie into that a little bit, but what is the single most important principle that guides your work, helping the leaders and teams perform at a higher level?
Yeah, the single most important principle is that the work starts with awareness. You, we cannot subjectively say what we feel to happen. As a matter of fact, what I like to say, right, Chris, is when let's say you were in a hotel, because I love analogies, right? You're in a hotel, we all travel. On the back of the door of every hotel room, no matter the size, is a placard, and that placard shows you what to do in case of emergency. And it's typically like a fire, right? And if you think about that, that's probably the highest pressure moment you could ever endure in that particular setting. But when you look at that placard, they don't show you the X as to where you want to go. They show you where you are, right? They said, this is where you are, and this is how you get to where you need to for safety. What the cultivation effect does is it gives companies, organizations, entrepreneurs, and founders a crystal clear identification of where we are, right? This is exactly where you are. So it makes the next step not just attainable, but inevitable. If you just traverse down here based on where we are, you can continue to grow sustainably and not just seasonally. So that's the single most important principle of the cultivation effect is grounding ourselves and identifying where we are right now.
Yeah, and that is totally makes sense as like a core principle because if you don't have like the main root problem, if you can't see exactly where you are, then you could be trying to solve using a lot of good solutions, but if you're solving the wrong problem, it's not going to help. And so that
Indeed.
totally makes sense. That
Indeed.
totally makes sense. From your perspective, what are some of the biggest shifts you're seeing in the industry right now? Just trends within the industry, like leadership development or organizational culture or team
Yeah.
performance, things like that.
Well, number one, because of the shift in how we need to involve systems in everything that we do, we got AI, tech is driving a lot of our solutions and a lot of what we're trying to do to orchestrate, right, sustainability. I'm seeing that companies are now shifting away from, hey, let's get motivated to do X, Y, and Z. And instead, what systems do we need to put in place to make sure that we can get to our end result, but we can do it as a byproduct of what we're doing day to day? That's so important because it shifts away from being so dependent upon the hero of the system, right? And if it's Chris is not there, then we're running in different directions. And so that's number one. Systems are being put at the epicenter of what we're doing. Number two, culture isn't just an eloquent statement that we plaster on every wall in every office or we put in every newsletter. It's becoming a reflection of what we reward, what we tolerate, and what we ignore. And when you look at culture like that, it really kind of helps organizations be more mindful of what happens day to day as their basic patterns, as a distilled version of what they reward, what they tolerate, and what they ignore. And then lastly, and most importantly, they're looking at leadership development as a core principle, not something that's a nice to have within their organization. If the health and longevity of your company or enterprise isn't grounded in how you develop your people, then eventually you'll fail. It's 100% true. And I think that companies are now seeing the importance of that development. And so they're putting it as a top priority in their hierarchy.
Yeah, that makes sense. That totally makes sense. Having the people first, right, above those like tools or above those things is the right order, right? And I get it with new things come out and people get excited and want to jump on it, but keeping the foundation where the people are,
Yeah.
That's the right way to do it, right?
Hmm. For sure.
I did want to know though, as like new approaches and tools and systems come out, are there any new technology that is changing how organizations, like you changing how organization cultivate alignment with,
Hmm.
just like resilience in the market and all that kind
Yeah.
of stuff.
Yeah. I think the crazy part about that question, Chris, is like we can be as fancy as we want to be right now as it pertains to like driving scale through AI and tech and things of that nature. But what we found, right, in our experience within the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years, is that the AI is an engine that's going to run at locomotive speed at whatever you tell it. But if you tell it to go the wrong way, it's going to drive you into the ground, right? And so the most important tools that organizations are using are diagnostics to be able to pinpoint precisely where their performance gaps are so that then they can use the tool to drive in the right direction.
Yeah.
So organizations are using assessments more, diagnostics more. They're becoming more divorced from the idea of let's just keep doing it this way because we've already always done it that way.
Mhm.
And that's kind of eliminated a lot of those false steps that have had companies kind of stalled in the water, so to speak.
Yeah, no, that totally that makes sense. Yeah, no, that really does make sense. It's really interesting to see because it's,
Mhm.
with those tools and the fancy things with AI and all this stuff coming out, it is great, right? But AI is not it's great from taking a direction, an idea from like 2 to 10, right? But
Yeah,
that critical point from like 0 to 1 is so important
yeah,
where if you get that wrong, it messes up the rest of it, right? And
indeed.
so it's that totally makes sense. Well, I wanted to kind of shift a little bit to like currently where you are at
Mhm.
with the cultivation effect.
Mhm.
What's currently working really well inside your business right now?
Yeah, what's working really well is getting grounded in, like we talked about before, and identifying where we are right now. I think what people want to do is they always want to improve. What organizations want to do is they always want to improve. And so we're really getting good at grounding ourselves in what that process looks like at the cultivation effect. Because improvement is such a subjective thing. It's almost like a resolution. Everybody on January 1st wants to resolve to do X, Y, and Z, but it's the clarity that comes from how that process unfolds in your particular life and my particular subset and environment. And so it's working really well at the cultivation effect is showing people how change actually takes place. And I was just, kind of reading a book called The Immunity to Change. And it's a phenomenal tool that allows us to see how we kind of act against ourselves when it comes to change, how organizations act against themselves and their own commitments unknowingly, just like our immune system acts against things that are trying to fight against us. And so what the cultivation effect does is it shows you what you're doing right now. It shows you what your commitment to change looks like. And then thirdly, and this is the most important part about it, Chris, it shows you what you're doing to act against your committed goals that are preventing you from taking that next step. So if you're saying we want to achieve new KPIs, we want to drive higher penetration rates, we want to drive down attrition percentages within our organization, but at the same time, you're running antiquated systems that yielded results that were good 5 years ago, but will never get us to where we want to be. If your attrition rates are low, but you never change your environment that you expect people to perform in, right, then you're not going to change. And so that really has gotten us a place of really good momentum, right, where we can say, okay, strip away ego. And that's number one. Is what I tell them, Chris. Let's strip away ego so that clarity becomes our best friend, not our enemy. And so at the cultivation effect, my clients know at the beginning is not going to be rainbows and unicorns, right? We're not going to get in here and dance the song, but we are going to get really grounded in clarity.
Yeah. No, that's good. I feel like getting it right from the get-go is so important, and that really sounds like that's like the main main part of like how you start off with your clients. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
So I wanted to know though, right? Because every business faces challenges and resistance.
Mhm.
Could you share a challenge that you have recently navigated, and what have you learned from that experience?
Yeah, for sure. So, really, when the cultivation effect first came out, the idea was, do we scale? Do we want to go laterally, right, and get as many clients as we possibly can, or do we want to go deep, right? And so, what the first bit of adversity that we had to overcome was, how do we get deep with organizations of different sizes and scales, right? An organization that may only have 10 to 100 employees, or an organization that has 10,000 plus, because that's going to be a very different solution subset, and how we architect growth is going to look a little different. So we had to be able to become almost chameleon like, right? Where it wasn't one size fits all, but the ability to integrate the principles in different landscapes with different organizations of different sizes was our first bit of adversity. And the way that we overcame that, Chris, was we looked at it from a standpoint of, it really shouldn't matter how many employees we have if we ground ourselves in our foundational principles, so that then we can identify where those skill gaps lie, or where we need to really put our emphasis first. And so at the Cultivation Effect, we kind of explode success into 7 integrated pillars. It's environment, patterns, alignment, execution, culture, resilience, and presence. And we think about this as interconnected gears to a clock, per se, right? So you look at the face of a clock, you might think it's telling the right time because of the big hand and the small hand and the dashes around the circle and everything like that. But that's not really the case. It's telling the right time because if you lift that face off, these smaller interconnected gears and sprockets are all turning in harmony. And if one of them is not turning at full capacity, the whole system is broken, right? And so we've just gotten really good at overcoming that adversity by saying, hey, it's not the full sum of your system that we want to focus on. It's those interconnected gears and sprockets. And so it doesn't matter if you're the biggest organizational conglomerate or you're a small startup. We all have those interconnected gears and sprockets.
Yeah, and that makes sense. They all affect each other, right? They're
Yes.
all connected and they all rely on each other's, right? It's that saying that they say in any team sport, right? Where it's like we're all strong as the weakest link, right?
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
it's all we're all connected. It all takes every single piece working together. So
Yes.
that totally makes sense. Well, I wanted to know, across like your workflow, right, from engaging to new organizations or onboarding leadership teams or, developing these programs, where do you see any like operational bottlenecks or frictions or things that maybe take up too much time right now?
That's a good question. I think the first thing that's really slowing down the reluctance to change and start becoming something new is because companies and organizations are so married to what got them there to that point. It's the reluctance to change based on what has been successful for us that we really have to start talking about and have conversations at length, because I need, from my standpoint, collective ownership of the fact that we have a problem, right? That's the number one thing. Is it's not that we're doing, to your point that you said before, we don't need to add and throw more money to and add different layers and develop a new tool. We don't need to necessarily add more. We need to look at what's no longer serving us and subtract away from. So companies and organizations are trying to open new doors with old keys, right?
Mm.
And so we look at this kind of counterintuitiveness, and we say, hey, look, let's look at it from the landscape of 30,000 feet, right? What did it used to do? And now where can we identify where it no longer served us? Okay, perfect. Now, if we took that out and we looked at it from a standpoint of what would accelerate the next best step, which is the second thing that we have to take organizations away from. We got to divorce ourselves from the idea that we'll get to an accelerated result like that because we're focused so much on the result that we trip over the next step, right? So I'm trying to get them really good at getting married to the logical next best step. And once we get there, we just continue to learn and we continue to grow, and then we repeat process and we continue to grow. And so that's kind of the process by which we've kind of overcome that bottleneck of, no, we're just going to do what we've already been doing. Like at Planet Fitness, you know, I'll use that as an example. They're always the judgment-free zone. They were always $10 a month. They were always, we don't want to necessarily cater to a different demographic. But what happened was they started to understand that things were evolving. The industry was evolving. The member perspective was evolving. The table stakes that members look to evolved. And so if Planet as an organization didn't evolve the way that they provided equipment, the way that they looked at digital guidance, the way that they scaled their marketing, it would have stayed there and they would have been overcome. They would not have been the big fish in the pond anymore. And so that's kind of what we're helping to do is overcome that. We can't just stay in our own way. But yeah, that's where we are.
Yeah, no, that's that's really interesting. It's really cool to see. Change management is such
Mm,
a tricky thing to manage. It's so hard and it's often like and I think it comes down to like because change we all naturally kind of resist change because it takes us out of our comfort zone, you know? And so it's so difficult to come in and to navigate this change because it all looks a little different. Every organization's different. Everyone's facing different challenges, right? But change management is definitely a difficult thing. So kudos to you because that's not an easy thing to come into organizations
yeah,
and navigate that change. And
yeah.
so
And,
yeah,
and
that's
just really quick, just one more part about that, Chris, is like when we have to look at what we normalize as a company and organization. I think many times we get really good at identifying that there's a friction point, but then at the same time we normalize it as the cost of doing business or the cost of growth or the cost of X, Y, and Z. And anything that gets normalized goes unchecked. And something like friction doesn't just stay friction, right? It becomes something much more dangerous and incendiary to your growth. It's like if you allow a germ to stay a germ, it doesn't stay a germ. It becomes a disease that affects your whole central nervous system, right? So these companies are starting to realize the friction that they once normalized starts to become an erosion of clarity, of team confidence, and ultimately of culture. And then that's when you start losing good leaders because we all know leaders don't leave companies. They divorce themselves from environments that no longer serve their growth. And that's kind of why it's so important to look at it from a standpoint of not only how can we grow, but how can we identify where we've left friction unchecked.
Yeah, no, that's totally makes sense. That's a really interesting point. I wanted to ask the where sorry, I wanted to ask
Yeah.
where are you going in your company? Looking ahead like 6 to 12 months, what
Mhm.
are some key goals or outcomes or milestones that you're focusing on achieving within your business?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I want to be able to look at the clients that I have right now and be able to quantify impact via driving down attrition, right? So we want to make sure that we're keeping good people for longer. We want to look at a standpoint of overall retention. If your business is based on serving members, if it's more EFT based, we want to see making sure we're not only keeping our people, we're serving our members and they're hitting their goals, right, at a rate that allows them to want to stay longer. And then lastly, I want to be able to exponentially grow not just the physical, like the workbook or my ability to go in and connect with these individual entities, but I also want to see a shift in the way that we're looking at cultural leadership. And so with the cultivation effect in the next 6 and 12 months, I want to be able to look at the subset of who I'm working with, but then I want to see a derivative of everyone looking at it differently. So now they're starting to seek the change and instead of being convinced that they need to change. There's a big inflection point there. And I know that there's a lot of work to be done within 6 and 12 months in order for us to get to that point. but I'm no stranger to hard work. I'm gonna run at it 100 miles an hour. I'm going to make sure that I'm asking the tough questions that make people say, I need the change, not convince me that I need to change.
Yeah, no, and that's a not an easy thing to try to tackle,
Yeah.
right? To think about, growing in that way. It's so much more impactful too though.
Yeah.
But it definitely is. It makes it tricky, it makes it difficult. But yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah.
I wanted to know what do you see as a big constraint that
Mm,
may be holding you back from that next level of growth?
mm. I think that's a great question. I think one of the biggest constraints holding me back from that growth is the fact that people get enamored with the shiny new thing on the showroom floor. And that's really AI. It's generative AI where people feel like I don't necessarily need to do the work as an organization or an entity or leadership. I have this tool now that can really do it for me. I can drive down my margins because now I could just put this tool out there and go. And it's just like, anything else where it takes a little bit of time for you to really put something out there to see where the clunkiness is and how it's maybe not realizing your expectations. And then you to come back and say, hey, on second thought, this is really what I needed. It's kind of like looking at it from a standpoint, a hammer is really good at hammering nails, but it really sucks at screwing in screws, right? I mean, it really sucks. So if you're using the tool in the wrong manner, then it's not going to serve the purpose that you intended to. And so my biggest constraint is to kind of get away from looking at AI as a one size fits all. This is going to get us from point A to point Z, and we're not really going to have to do a lot of work internally to shape and restructure. And so that's the biggest constraint. I think everything else, because I'm not selling people if you do this, you 10x your profit by doing blah, 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 blah. No shade to anybody that's doing that because some of those things actually work. But what I'm giving people is clarity, and there's no cap to that, right? It's like we look in the mirror every single day, multiple times a day, right? You and I know I can speak with experience because I looked in the mirror 3 times before I got on here, right? And so what I'm giving to organizations is the clearest mirror for them to look at any point in time that they need to be able to say, this is where we are now and this is where we need to go. So my biggest constraint is getting them away from that shiny new generative AI to actually doing real change work.
Yeah, yeah, because that totally makes sense. As even me as having an AI agency overseeing Simple AI Solutions, it is very interesting to see that mindset of let's just throw a tool at it, and yeah, when you use it in the correct way, right, it makes a big impact,
Yeah,
right? But it's not AI can't solve everything, right?
right.
And when people go out and say that it's not the truth, but it can help a lot when applied the correct way. And so and it's difficult, right? Because
Yeah.
AI, there's constantly new things coming out.
Oh, yeah.
I'm always, even in the industry itself, I'm learning new things all the time. This tool and this and that, and like navigating, it's tough because AI is impacting so many different businesses
Yes.
in an amazing way. It's a great way, but it's hard to figure out how to best use that the correct way, right?
Yeah.
And so it is difficult to figure out how to do that. And when you do have clarity, I think that's why someone like you doing what you're doing is so important because when you come into something with clarity, you can put those things into effect the correct way. If
Right.
it's AI or if it's not AI,
Yeah.
and so that totally makes sense. So yeah, that is awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Teddy, I've really enjoyed the conversation. Some of the things you brought to the table were really cool. Really interesting to see how the cultivation effect is just growing and in what you're doing and just hearing about you talking about it makes me excited. I'm excited to see where you go, what you'll do, and just how this will grow. But I wanted to let our listeners hear a little bit. Where can they find out more about the cultivation effect and what you're doing?
Yes, first and foremost, I appreciate the support and the opportunity to just kind of talk about it and to get it out there as much as I possibly can. This podcast is awesome because we're really talking about like the X's and O's, not the touchdowns and first downs, but what it takes to be successful at driving change, right? Change management, like we're talking about. And I like to say change excellence, right? I don't want to manage change. I want it to be excellent. And so to get more information about what we're doing at the Cultivation Effect, you can go to our website at thecultivationeffect.com. There, you're not only going to be able to get the context on where we got started and what's important for us as it pertains to serving you, but then you'll also be able to take a diagnostic and see where you score out in the four main pillars, which are going to be your environment, your patterns, your alignment, and your execution. From there, then you can get the Cultivation Effect Volume 1 Foundations Workbook straight from the website. You can actually use that as a daily check, right? So you can look at it from a standpoint of when I wake up today, what's the pillar I'm focused on? What am I going to examine as the thing that no longer serves me? And then what am I going to substitute it with to grow? You can follow me on social at the Cultivation Effect on IG or T_dot_savage on Instagram as well. And I'm on LinkedIn. So all of the tributaries, Chris, lead into TCE. And I'm so excited because everyone, no matter your organization, your title, your department, your subject matter expertise, everyone has an opportunity to grow. We have potential that we forfeited for long enough. And now we just need to marry ourselves to the fact that this is the process by which we get better. And that's what the
Yeah.
cultivation is.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, since this is to close, since this is the Business Leaders Legacy podcast and you being a business leader leading the cultivation effect, I wanted to know what kind of legacy do you want
Mm,
to leave behind?
mm. That one is that I could go for a whole nother half hour on that one. My legacy that I want to leave behind specifically to being a business owner is I want to make sure that we never get away from putting our people at the epicenter of everything that we do. Our people are the locomotive engine that drives everything. They bring culture to life. They make sure that our systems are running in alignment with our goals, and then our products become a byproduct of how we invest in our people. As organizations grow, as tools are refined and redefined, never losing sight of people being the main ingredient to our sustainable success. That's the legacy I want to leave behind. And no one, and I want to repeat, no one is above change. I don't care what level you are in the org structure, no one is above change.
Yeah, that is awesome. That is really cool. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time. For everyone listening, thank you for tuning in. This is the Business Leaders Legacy podcast. And please subscribe if you enjoyed the conversation. And we will see you next time. Thank you again, Teddy.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it, guys.